I am back. Sorry for the kind of long absence. I really didn't intend to take a big break in my posting. However, as you know, I finished the first draft of my book and I sort of batch made a few follow up videos about like the writing process, editing process, etc. And then I went on holiday. And then I thought when I got back from holiday, I would just sit down and get straight back to filming. However, I just really didn't want to. Something happened that I was sad about, and I was also just kind of hardcore in rest mode. Like, after finishing that book, every bit of momentum, every bit of me that like wants to work hard and do all of this extracurricular stuff just sort of died and was just like, hey, we need a timeout. And I just wasn't really feeling inspired. And you know what? It's not fair to you guys, the people that actually watch, to watch me kind of half ass this. So I've taken a few weeks off and I'm back and I'm going to do my very, very late May wrap up. If I can even remember what I thought of these books, we shall see. And we are in the middle of a really crazy heat wave in the UK. I know everyone laughs about that, but it's bloody roasting in our houses, and my house is entirely south facing. So I'm going to be taking some fan breaks because sitting in front of a light is like actual torture. Okay, that's enough. Let's start off talking about this big bad boy, Furybound, the follow up to Direbound, which I read earlier in the year and absolutely loved. Were some of the plot twists predictable? Yes, but it still had me gagged. I had a good time. I had Fourth Wing kind of vibes, but with wolves. Loved it. Loved Direbound. Furybound, I liked. I liked it as well. However, did it hit as much as the first one? No. This book picks up directly after Direbound, so it's kind of hard to talk about this with you unless you've read Direbound. But there's a big twist that happens at the very end that's a bit of a shock, and we pick up from that moment, and we see how our main character kind of deals with the cost of that twist. And that twist, it kind of brings about a lot of permanent change for our characters in this book. So this book is largely about dealing with that, and it's also about collecting these tears, these diamond things that have powers. Big bulk of the book is about that, and Merrin's also kind of stepping into her power as the rightful queen. And people don't really believe that she's a real queen. They're not really taking her word for it, which is kind of fair enough because, like, who the fuck are you? You've been here for like 3 months and now you're like the queen? Okay. So she's dealing with that. The whole nation is dealing with that. And we're learning information that's shedding more light on, like, this kingdom or queendom and kind of how it works. And we also have this classic romanticy plot of the new love interest and them getting to know each other and everything. Hopefully, none of that spoiled Direbound for anyone that's not read it. But yeah, as you can tell, I've kind of forgotten a lot of this book already now that it's been a month since I read it. It wasn't quite as memorable, but there was action, there were twists, there were shocking moments. I thought the fantasy elements were pretty good for a romantasy. The romantasy elements were good, obviously. And yeah, it was fine, it was good. I think it was all quite necessary, and maybe we'll have a more exciting final book now that like a lot of the setup has kind of been done for that. There was a twist at the end of this book, which is pretty interesting, so I'm intrigued to see where that'll go. And I think, like, on the whole, as a second book, I'm not mad at it. It did pretty well. It was definitely better than, like, Brimstone as the follow up to Quicksilver. I don't think that one was very good at all. This one felt a lot more cohesive, which I appreciate. That being said, let's move on. If you want me to do a video going into like what actually happened, full spoilers, I can do that. Just let me know in the comments. But the longer that passes, the more I'm going to forget what happens, and I already feel a bit hazy on the details, so yeah, not promising it'll be good if I do, but I can if you like. Next, let's talk about the audiobook I did. Took up like all of May and some of June as well, to be honest, but I'm just going to include it in the May video. I listened to Tainted Kahn, which is a follow up from Dragon Rider by Taran Matthew. I think that's how you say it. I don't know because I don't have the book in front of me. And yeah, this was another second book in the series, and the third book is coming out later this year. We follow Jai and his dragon as he kind of goes to his home nation, this grassland in the steppe. He's kind of a hostage and a captive, but we kind of see him learn about his own culture. Obviously, he was kind of kidnapped by his colonizer at like age 5 or something, so he doesn't know a lot about his own culture. We see him learning and grappling with this, and see him take his place as the Kahn, stepping into his power. Kind of similar to Furybound, I guess, but very different setting. And we see him developing his like dragon bond as well. But this book was so long, it was like a 21-hour audiobook, and most of it took place in this grassland with this kind of politics. The culture is kind of similar to the Dothraki, maybe a little bit less violent, but that's kind of how I pictured it. But instead of them being horse lords like the Dothraki in Game of Thrones, they are the lords of these hero beasts, which I think are kind of like big bison type things. That's how I pictured them anyway. And yeah, it's all very tribal. But we didn't get much conflict with the Sabines, those kind of Roman style colonizers that they're at war with. Didn't see much of that plot move forward. We didn't really see Titus or any of the big enemies from book one. We kind of felt their presence because they were attacking some of the other tribes. But for the majority of the book, they were kind of a ominous presence that wasn't at the forefront of the plot. We also didn't have Rufus much in the book. In fact, I don't think we had him at all, apart from references to him in the journal. And we also didn't get much of Erica until the last quarter or third of the book. And what we got from her was good, but it was very little for most of the book, and it was mostly with Jai, and it was mostly this great step plotline. And unfortunately, I did get a bit bored because I felt like we stayed there for too long. It was all necessary, it was all stuff that has to happen for the final installment, I think. But whereas the first book, we were kind of in the Empire, and then we were traveling, and then we were in the prison camp, and we had a lot of different settings. We had a lot of different like sections of the plot and exciting things that happened. This book just had less of that, less diversity in setting and plot, and also what did happen was less shocking than the first book, and it was a little bit less interesting to me personally. I think the last third it picked up, but it took a long time to get there. So yeah, it was a little bit disappointing, but I'm still open. I'm still going to read the third book when it comes out as an audiobook. And I'm intrigued to see how it all ends, but I definitely wasn't as captivated as I was with the first one, unfortunately. Next, let's talk about one of the hottest books of the year, Yesteryear. I think I'm going to do a whole video about this, so I might keep this portion brief. But basically, everyone is talking about Yesteryear. We did it for our book club. My work book club's also doing it. I think every book club in existence is probably doing it because it's just one of those books that has a lot of talking points and is quite polarizing. It's quite captivating. It's got a really interesting premise. It's like book club crack. This is about a conservative influencer who is all into those traditional values in marriage and parenthood and making bread from scratch and keeping her own chickens and making like roast dinners that take 8 hours and doing like tutorials about it on Instagram. She somehow finds herself back in time in yesteryear, where she has to deal with the real challenges that come with living in like the 1800s. And the story kind of flips between short snippets of her living in yesteryear and more of a present day narrative that takes us from her kind of college years all the way through to how she got to yesteryear. She's kind of a really unreliable narrator, quite an unlikable person. She's not very nice to other people, and she kind of thinks that her way of living life is the only way to live life, and she really doubles down on that, even when deep down she kind of doesn't genuinely enjoy motherhood. She doesn't genuinely really love her husband that she meets and marries quite early. She's sort of trapped in this prison of her own making, of her own beliefs. And it's quite interesting to see her grapple with this. She ends up getting into social media and making some money that way, finding some power in her life that way. But she's very phony. She'll like have two nannies looking after the kids and then pretending that she's doing it all herself and being like this super traditional angelic mum that does it all and has it all. She's hate watched on Instagram and YouTube by a lot of people. She refers to these people as just the angry women, and she just always has this kind of holier than thou attitude. But she covers that up by putting on this persona, her online Natalie persona, where she pretends to be kind and she pretends to be this lovely Christian woman when deep down she's like actually quite mean and unkind and judgmental. This book is a satire, so a lot of the other characters are caricatures as well. So is she to a degree, although she's a little bit more complex. And I've seen a lot of people critique the book because the other characters are caricatures, but like that's kind of the point. So personally, I wouldn't critique it for that reason. I actually don't have many criticisms of this book at all. I thought it was excellent. I rated it 5 stars. Some other people have been more critical, but honestly, this book made me cry at the end. I actually felt some empathy for Natalie, despite, the fact that she's a bit of a dick. And more than anything, like, I felt really bad for the children. And I felt really bad that she was clearly quite mentally ill, struggling with postpartum depression that no one really recognised or helped her with, that she also didn't recognise. And she's not the kind of person that probably would have sought help for that. She was sort of told to, like, just get over it, and this is what motherhood is, and you just have to, like, suck it up and do it. And she did, and then she kept doing it and kept doing it like some kind of farm animal, just birthing child after child that she really didn't even want and struggling with it most of the time. And yeah, I felt really bad for her and for the kids because it was just a terrible situation that could have been avoided if she'd just been brave enough to be true to herself, if she hadn't been in this prison of her own beliefs. And yeah, I thought that was quite tough to read about at times. But I'll make a separate video because I've got more to say and I don't want to like go into spoilers in this video. So tune in at some point over the next few weeks for that. Speaking of motherhood and postpartum depression and struggling, I then went on to read So Thrilled for You, and I devoured this in about 3 days. This was so much fun, but also a hard read from that topical point of view. This is about a group of friends that are all at kind of different stages in their life regarding children. One of them's pregnant, she's literally just about to give birth, and one of her friends is throwing her a baby shower. This friend is desperate to be a mum. She's been through loads of IVF. She is not gotten pregnant yet, and she's trying to put that aside and throw a nice baby shower for her friend, but she's kind of doing all of the things that she would want at her ideal baby shower, and she's putting herself into it quite a lot, which is annoying this pregnant friend. Then another of the friends has like a 10-month-old baby, and she is really going for it. She had a really traumatic birth. She's got PTSD, she's got postnatal depression, and yeah, she's going to this baby shower with this young child, and she's just scattered, really struggling, and is finding it hard to like be happy for her pregnant friend because she's finding the baby shower triggering. She doesn't want to like put the friend off and scare her, but she can also be like, yay, like you're gonna have so much fun, because she's miserable and she's really struggling. And then we have the fourth friend who doesn't want to have children, isn't having children, and she is attending the baby shower, and she feels a little bit abandoned by some of her friends because they don't take as much interest in her life. It's all about babies all the time. And like on one hand that's fair enough, but she's also going through this really big career change where she's taken on her own literary agency. She, on the day of the baby shower, is doing like the biggest sale of her life. Like the book that's launching her agency is getting this 7-figure deal. It's a big deal, and she's trying to field emails and calls while at the baby shower with little signal. She doesn't want her pregnant friend to be resentful of her for being on her phone all day because they have a bit of a tense relationship. And yeah, this whole baby shower is just kind of tense, and these friendships are on tenuous ground. And then someone at the baby shower commits arson. So we know this going into the book. It's kind of the opener of the book. And then we go back to the start of the day, and the whole book takes place at the baby shower, and it's a little bit of a whodunit. And the chapters go between each of the four friends, and we kind of get their backstory, the context of the friendship, what's happening at the baby shower. It's really blended, and we get to learn a lot about all of their different perspectives and the thoughts they're having about each other and the resentments and the hurt. And yeah, we kind of see how this friendship can knit back together as well, and how they can get a bit more on the same page, which is really nice. And yeah, I really love this book. I found a way to relate to most of the characters, apart from one of them, the pregnant one. She was a bit annoying. Didn't like her. Not because she was pregnant, but because she did some other problematic things. But yeah, I really felt for like everyone else. And Holly Bourne, the author, she really put a lot of her experience of pregnancy and the birth and postpartum into the book. I think she struggled a lot. So it felt very honest. It felt like a story a lot of people need to hear, no matter where on the having children spectrum you are. I think it's hard for everyone, probably harder for some, like the one with postpartum depression, and that is kind of addressed in the book. But we can all support each other and we can all be friends and support each other no matter what part of the journey we're on, which I think is really nice. And I would really recommend the book. It was like heartbreaking and funny and just all the emotions. Weird to describe a book that covers such serious topics as fun, but it was kind of fun at the same time. So nice and balanced. Then I read The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This also kind of talks about motherhood, but in a very different way. This is about a mother and daughter who live in a cabin in the woods and they are cannibals. And it's kind of a literary folk horror novel. It's very Hansel and Gretel inspired. They live in this grotty house that's covered in mold. They kind of tempt in strays, people that are a bit lost in the wilderness, and they eat them. And it's just this mother and daughter for the longest time until this other woman comes along and sort of becomes part of their lives. And then the daughter, who's about 10 or 11, starts to have this shifting dynamic with her mother, feels kind of pushed out by this other woman. We see her grappling with the idea of like cannibalism, and we see like her mother's resentment of her, her abusive behavior towards her, but the love that they share as well, and just this really complicated relationship that is complicated on the page but is also symbolized by the cannibalism as well. And it is a horror. It does have quite horrendous elements. The ending is quite horrendous, so trigger warning, obviously, cannibalism. But it was really compelling. It was a really good book. The prose was great, and it was like short chapters, so it was quite easy to consume, no pun intended. And there are some reading group questions at the back of the book, which I can't be bothered going through because I read this like 2 months ago now. But I like that. It means you can think about the symbolism and do a little bit of a study at the end, which is nice. It's always good to think critically. Maybe when you're not like in a heat wave, and try ease back into YouTube though. And then finally, a little bit of a controversial one. I read While Time Remains by Yeonmi Park. Yeonmi Park is a North Korean defector. I read her first book, which is her memoir all about her escape from North Korea, how she ended up being trafficked in China, and then made her way to South Korea through the Gobi Desert, and then to America. She's now an American citizen. She's done like her whole GED. She's been to Columbia University. And this book is about her going to Columbia, being very disillusioned by all of the left wing politics and the wokeism. She's now kind of in with Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Fox News. She's one of those pundit kind of people. She literally like thanks Candace Owen and like Prager U in this book. So she's very much of that ilk. And that really comes across in this book, where she kind of takes this romanticization of communism that we see on the left and this wokeism and control of words and things. And she kind of posits how this compares to North Korea and the communist regime, which obviously she hates and is very sensitive to, which is fair enough. And her whole kind of thesis statement is that we need to be mindful of this in the US and in the West in general and not let extreme communism come into play. So it is a biased book, and I knew that going into it. I read this specifically as research for my own book, the one I just finished, because I feel like I've basically taken her fear of USA but communist and basically done that as my dystopia. And she kind of talks about some of the behaviours in the culture at the moment and how they could go down a slippery slope to being, like I write in my book, more extremism, etc. So I read it for research, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a really good book, biases aside, and didn't agree with everything she said, but she also had some really interesting things to say about China and how the people of Hollywood and people like Jeff Bezos, who she spoke to, he invited her to speak at a dinner. She shared her story about her escape from North Korea and her trafficking in China. And he was really moved. She met Hillary Clinton, who was also really moved. She met all of these rich and powerful American people. She met Harvey Weinstein, not knowing that he was a predator, and then found out later that he was a predator and that everyone in the room also knew that he was a predator and just didn't care. And she was like, what the hell? Like, because she has been trafficked and she has been a victim of those kind of crimes. So she really commented a lot on that hypocrisy. She had powerful people straight up say, actually, we can't invite you or we can't really help you because all of our investors are Chinese. So, no, we can't donate any money to help free people from trafficking in China and get them out and get them to safety. And by people, I mean North Korean defectors specifically. Basically, what happens is traffickers will find them in North Korea and kind of sell them on the dream of getting out. They'll get them to China and then they'll sell them to like farmers that are looking for a wife because there aren't as many women in China. So these women basically end up in slavery in China. They end up in like call centers of a certain nature and they can't really do anything about it because if they go to the police in China will just send them back to North Korea where they will go to a prison camp and be killed. So they really end up in a tough situation. It's not enough to escape North Korea into China. They have to then take another route. One of them is through the Gobi Desert, which is what Yeonmi did, and they have to escape from China as well, and then get back to South Korea, where then they can end up getting some support, and a lot of them end up going to the US and places like that too. So the way to help North Koreans is to put pressure on China to stop doing this, to stop supporting North Korea, and to help the girls that are in China, men and women, but a lot of women and girls that are in this bad situation in China, helping them get out of China. And yes, lots of these rich and powerful people who definitely have enough money and power to put pressure on China to do something about this literally turned around to her and said, no, we are not helping you because it basically isn't financially a good idea for us and we need to get along with China. So that's something I wouldn't have learned about if I'd just gone, nah, she's in with that lot, then I'm not listening to her. I think it's good to sometimes listen to people, even if you think you're going to disagree with them, because yes, you might see their biases and you might disagree with them, but they also might say some things that are interesting and that you might learn from. And at the very least, you're then kind of disagreeing with them from an informed place. You've actually listened, and then you can disagree with all of the facts. So, yeah, controversial, controversial person. Lots of people think she lies about stuff. I don't know about that, but interesting nonetheless. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that stuck around and didn't unsubscribe while I was taking my break. You're all absolute real ones. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing because I usually put out videos every week. But don't shoot me if I take some breaks. God forbid. Oh, and go and follow me on Instagram as well. Because my Instagram is dead. I don't think I've gained a new follower in like months. So go follow me over there and see what I read in real time. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.